Guys, so I'm going to start notes for this unit IS3 on evolution today. We're going to divide the packet into probably three again. So we'll start with part one today where we look at the earth science portion of this and how that connects to the fossil record, which then will lead us to embryological and other bits of evidence for evolution. If you could print out your packet and write on it, that would be great. If you want to just type directly onto the Google Doc, that's totally fine too. Or you can just jot down your notes by hand and just take pictures of that and submit that to me as well. And anything is fine. If you have questions though, you really do need to be sure you bring them to class and ask when I ask if there's homework questions. Some of this stuff can be confusing, especially when we dive into some of the evidence and some of the other in particular Lamarck versus Darwin. Some of that stuff can be a little bit confusing, and there is definitely validity to asking some questions. So please bring your questions to class. The other thing I wanted to mention is there is a separate PDF of the biosome page that is in the notes. You'll have to upload or open up that to complete that part of the notes packet. I'm not going to go over it too much in the video because I want you to do it and then bring that to class if you have questions on that one too. And that one is just dealing with weathering and erosion. So it's not horribly complicated. Hopefully it's a review from some of the stuff you did before. There are several videos in this notes segment. We are going to watch some of them in class, and I'll actually be playing one of them during the notes. So the one I'm playing is on slide 6, and it's less than 3 minutes. The other ones I'm going to we're going to probably use as openers or just put them in at some other time during class. So be prepared for that as well. Again, let's get started and turn this in by Monday for me, please. All right, so the notes packet looks like this, and it's only going to be through slide 26 for this first part. So I'll try to go semi-quickly for you right there. Okay, that's it. So 5 pages for the first part. This is a long one. This is a 13-page packet. All right, so let's get started. And on here, this video we will be watching in class, or we have already watched if you're watching this after Tuesday, Wednesday. All right, geological time. Evolution is change over a period of time and is based on present scientific data. That means it can change as new information comes to light, especially as we go and we find older fossils and they're redoing the timeline for when different organisms appeared, when other ones went extinct. All of that is from evidence that we have found through fossils in the fossil record. So that is evidence of evolution is found in remains that we call fossils. Should not be a new term to anybody. It was on your vocab chart last week, so make sure you did that. All right, so there are 4 different types of fossil formations that we will be studying. The first is imprint, which is formed from soft body parts. They decompose and go away, and they leave an imprint in the rock. The next is molds or casts, and this is again where you have soft parts that had been there and they dissolved away and you have a cast remain of it. So this is an imprint and this one here is a cast. They're very similar, but this one's more flat. This one is more 3-dimensional. All right, the next is petrified, where we have hard parts replaced by minerals. We actually have petrified forests where you have trees that are actually rocks that look like trees because they've been petrified. They have no more organic material. It's all been replaced by minerals, which makes up rocks. Amber is hardened sticky plant resin, which can capture small organisms, and then we can then go get that and see that they're very well preserved and get some information from that. Scientists, as a side note, reasoned that the Arctic was once warm and humid, and that is because they have found these petrified forests that indicate that there was a lot of trees there, which means it must have been warmer than it is now because now there's no trees. So that's kind of where that is. We're going to do this guided reading at another time. We will not be doing that right now. All right, geological timeline. Timeline of life made by scientists. Those scientists are called paleontologists because they are the ones that are studying the fossils in the fossil record. This is the rough timeline. We have 3 eras. That's the largest chunk the least specific. We have the Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic. The eras break down into different periods, and that's slightly more specific. Okay, so we have sorry, where am I? Okay, so these are our eras. Sorry, these are our periods in here. The Precambrian, where's Precambrian? I've lost my, it's before Cambrian. Precambrian's got to be down here. Lasted about 4 billion years, and evidence of bacteria and algae are present during that Precambrian time. So anything before the Cambrian is the Precambrian. Okay, not the best picture for that one. Here is the we are not doing this video. This one's the 11-minute one. Okay, so we'll get this video in class. All right, this is the one we're going to watch. How do rocks form? Okay.
I was walking my dog on the beach when I noticed that the cliffs are made of horizontal stripes of rock. But what causes this? To understand this, we need to explain how sediments are formed and explain how sediments are turned into layers of new rocks. Existing rocks can be broken down into small pieces or sediments in a process called weathering. There are 3 main types of weathering. Physical weathering is caused by temperature changes. For example, in freeze-thaw weathering, water gets into cracks in the rock. When the water freezes, it expands and forces the rock apart. This happens many times, eventually breaking the rock. An example of chemical weathering is when acid rain reacts with substances in rocks. Even plants or animals can break up rocks. This is biological weathering. The sediments formed by weathering can be moved away by water, ice, wind, or gravity. The combined process of weathering and transport is called erosion. Eventually, sediments settle in one place. For example, they may sink to the bottom of the sea. This is called deposition. More layers of sediment are deposited on top. Over millions of years, the weight of the layers above compress the ones below, and they harden into sedimentary rock in a process called compaction. Sometimes another substance seeps between the sediments and hardens, sticking or cementing the sediments together. The whole process leads to the formation of horizontal layers of sedimentary rock. So, erosion breaks old rocks into small pieces and transports the sediments. These are deposited in layers and compacted into sedimentary rocks. This explains the stripy appearance of the cliffs at the beach. Each stripe is a layer of sedimentary rock.
Okie dokie. Let's go back to this. All right, so first of all, when it says,
let's get started.
How do rocks form? It's important to note that we are talking only about sedimentary rocks. There are igneous and metamorphic rocks, and those ones form in a very different way. So igneous and metamorphic deal with pressure and volcanism and high heat and other things that sedimentary rocks do not. Sedimentary rocks are just sediments that get layered, they form layers and they compact and cement, and that's how we get those sedimentary rocks. Hopefully you did that in middle school. You should have covered all 3 rock types in middle school. All right. The formation of sedimentary rock. Weathering and erosion break rock into smaller bits called sediment. The sediment is then going to be transported via wind, water, ice, or gravity, it can include multiple of those transportation mechanisms, or it can be just one. And then the sediment then gets deposited somewhere else, and then it gets compacted and cemented, which will make that new rock layer. And I have some really awesome pictures that I took over the last few months of different places where we can see sedimentary rock formation. We went to the beach and we could see it along the coast there. And then I also saw some weathering and erosion that looked pretty interesting that I want to share with you guys, hopefully at some point this semester. See? I know my kids always make fun of me and say I'm such a teacher, always doing pictures for school, blah, blah, blah. I know. All right, formation of sedimentary rocks. Fossils form when layers are deposited on top of remains. Almost all fossils are found in sedimentary rock. That is because of how sedimentary rocks are formed. If it has to go through extreme heat or pressure, that will destroy whatever is in the rock. It gets they get melted down, reformed, cooled, or they get so much pressure that it deforms, and you won't have preserved fossils that way. That's just the way it goes. So now we're going to look at the principle of superposition, which I believe we talked about at the beginning of the year. I'm hopeful that this is not completely new. I really feel like we did. I can't remember though. Principle of superposition states that in undisturbed rock, the bottom layer is the oldest and the top layer is going to be the youngest. So we have layers of rock here, and if you were to be looking at maybe a cliff and you were down at the bottom of the cliff, you'd be looking way back in time at the bottom, and at the top of the cliff, that would be the brand new topsoil that had been laid down. We use two types of dating. Relative dating uses the age of a rock layer compared to another rock layer. So if something's older or younger. So you would say this greenish layer is older than this brown layer here, or it's younger than this layer right here because it's on top of this one and it's below this one. So therefore, that's how you use it. It's not with specific dates. On the other hand, we have absolute dating, which is a numeric age of rock determined through radiometric dating. Okay, and we'll talk about radiometric dating. Or did we already? I think we already did talk about that. We might have. Weathering and erosion. Weathering is the chemical, physical, and biological process of breaking rocks and minerals down into smaller pieces. Erosion is the loosening or removal and transplant of weathered material by wind, water, ice, and gravity. Okay, so here's where you're going to go into the PDF that is in Google Classroom, and I've got it right here. There's a part that you're skipping on page 139 because that's for a previous activity. You're going to read through weathering and erosion and complete 11 through 14, which I replicated onto your notes packet. So please make sure you double click on the boxes in your packet so that you can write directly on there. I mean, unless you print it out. If you print it out, just write in the boxes. And then when you're done with that, come back to the notes, or you can do it after you do the notes. I'm fine either which way. You don't have to have that too. It does help make the rest of it make more sense, but you don't have to have it necessarily. So if you want to do it after you do the notes, that's fine too. Okay, so we're going to look at the processes, and hopefully you did do the notes and you know what the different processes are. So we have number 1 here, and this has evolved, for lack of a better word, formed through wind erosion. Okay. The second one is going to be cracked in half. So this one had some physical weathering, probably some water got in and it froze and expanded, froze and expanded, years and years and years of that to make that crack. The third one, this one looks like it is glaciers, so ice erosion, okay, formed this one. Number 4, tree, inside rock. That would be biological weathering. Biological weathering. This one looks like it's kind of been eaten away a little bit. So this probably had some acid rain, or maybe just not necessarily really strongly acidic rain, but something like that. Or it could have been exposed to some other chemical stuff. So this one is chemical weathering on that one. Number 6, we have these kind of circles that are smooth in some granite. You'll find this along riverbeds. This one is water erosion, and I actually have some really awesome pictures of some natural ones over. We went to Bassy Falls this last weekend, and I got some really great pictures of um, rocks that have these types of things on them, and that's definitely water that formed that. And then here we had a rock fall, which is gravity erosion. Okay. Which I probably should not have gone through and told you all of that because I gave it to you right here. You were supposed to guess. I forgot. Oh well. Moving on. What evidence supports the theory of evolution? So we're going to talk about a little bit of this. Okay. We have four different types of evidence: fossil, anatomical, molecular, and embryological. An example of evolution can have multiple types of evidence supporting it. So it's really important to understand that we don't just pick one type of evidence to support something. For something to be widely accepted, it has to have a variety of methods of supporting it so that it's not just like a stab in the dark with some one thing supporting it. You have to be able to consistently prove something for it to be widely accepted. So, what is the theory of plate tectonics? And why are we talking about plate tectonics? Well, we're talking about plate tectonics because fossil evidence supports it, and it says that the Earth's crust is made of rigid, meaning stiff, like lithospheric plates that were once connected, and they have since drifted apart. When they were connected, we have animals that freely roamed, had ranges that were on all different, like the what is the green one? This Glossopteris. Thank you. Glossopteris was found on all these different land masses, which are separated by huge oceans now, and their seeds, or the evidence we have is seeds, and they cannot fly. They're too heavy to go and have been transported via wind. The continents are too far apart to have been separated and had like birds bring them to different regions. So it makes sense that the land was all connected and that these seeds were able to disperse along maybe some ranges of other organisms that transported them when they were connected. So this is a very big piece of evidence that we use to indicate that the land was once together. They are drifting apart. And are we talking about yes we are, how those continents have drifted apart. Okay, this is going to show you what we think it looked like about 250 million years ago. When we had that landmass called Pangaea. And you can see as we get closer to present day, the continents have broken apart and shifted. They're continuously moving, okay? And how long is this video? 3 minutes? We're gonna watch this one. Okay, so that is interesting. It's just one view of what it might look like in 100 million years. And it's interesting. I actually went to NAU. I did not have that professor, but that is a school that I went to for 2 years in college. It's a great school, by the way. All right. Fossil evidence. Found in the fossil record, horse and whale evolution is well documented, and there are things that we call. Why did I put the? I don't even know why I did that like that. Fossils that have a mixture of features of two different but related taxonomic groups are called transitional fossils. So we have the example of Archaeopteryx, a transitional form between birds and non-avian dinosaurs. So it's something that goes between, like you have an old one that's gone extinct and you have your new one, and it's the intermediary one that came in between. So we have some for on the hominid line as well, which is the human line. How long is this one? Uh, 2 minutes, but I feel like this is part of the things we're doing. I feel like this one is, we're going to watch this one in class. Okay, so we're not going to do that one. Okay. Anatomical evidence. So we have fossil evidence, now we have anatomical evidence. We have homologous organs or body parts that are similar in structure. For example, the forelimbs of whales is similar in structure to the human arm. Obviously, it's in a very different scale. The whale is much larger than the human arm. And the Hox genes are another example of something that is similar in different organisms. The human appendix will also provide evidence of evolution because that is a vestigial organ, meaning that we still have it. It doesn't do anything anymore. It used to do something, but it doesn't do anything anymore. Another vestigial organ is the, so here's our appendix, is the pelvis and femur in a whale. And that's important because it indicates that at one time, whales probably walked on land and had legs, back legs. So it's very interesting that this is still a remnant from long, long time ago. And here's our arms, the forearms. The whale has the same bones as the human arm. Excuse me.
Your body is a temple, but it's also a museum of natural history.
I am not going to
look closely
right now, so we'll watch that one later. Our video is getting too long. Molecular evidence. So we have DNA evidence, which it's molecular because it's at the molecular level. It's small. So DNA is tiny, and comparing sequences of different organisms we can determine how closely related the different groups are. We think we talked about this last week. We talked about DNA as being a way to determine how closely related organisms are. It can also give you an estimate of when those groups diverged. And diverged means when they were the same, and then there was something that happened that caused one group to branch off into a different group altogether. And we can tell that with the DNA because how many differences indicate kind of how far back the divergence occurred. More differences mean it happened longer ago. Proteins. Scientists look for mutations of homologous protein sequences. They are highly conserved, meaning they do not change often. They stay the same, they don't mutate. If you have differences, that means you have something that was a significant divergent, something changed in that species significantly from the other one. And because it doesn't happen often, it must have been a significant thing for it to actually make that change. So here's an example of the molecular evidence. We have humans, chimpanzees, gorillas, mouses, and then another ancestor, and horses. Okay, all of them have this part that's the same, okay, which means there was at some point a common ancestor that had shared this. This is different, so this is not gonna, it's just showing you a different strand there. We have more in common. The more in common we have, the more closely related. So we are closely, for this purpose, related to these three: chimpanzees, gorillas, and mouse. Not so much the horse. And this one has the gorilla and the mouse have just one trait or variant in common. The chimpanzee, though, has a second one that makes it more closely related to us. So we look at our sequences and how similar they are shows us how closely related. The more differences, the less closely related we are. More differences. So we have cladograms, and we also have, so this is a cladogram. We also look at hemoglobin and myoglobin, which are types of our blood proteins. Those are the proteins that if there's more differences, there's more divergences. And since they don't change often, they're major changes that have occurred. And more of them means you're going back further in history for when that divergence occurred. Okay, so we have humans and macaws and dogs and birds, and we go back. This is a human and a macaw have only 8 amino acid differences, which is your proteins. Remember, amino acids make up proteins. There's 32 between humans and dogs, 45 between humans and birds. So these they've split off longer ago. We have had more time to develop as our own separate species. Okay. Using this cladogram, let's describe the evolutionary sequence from which animals arose. You will see there are 3 domains. We have bacteria, archaea, and eukaryota, which is usually called eukarya. You will almost always see it as eukarya. Back down here, we have our last common universal ancestor, which is frequently referred to as LUCA. Okay, so let's describe how animals came about. So I would start with, at some point in ancient history, there was a common ancestor, okay? And then go from there. What broke off from where? And you can make it basic and talk about the domains and then get more specific as you move up, okay? So pause here and make sure you complete that in your notes packets. Okay, hopefully you finished that and you have some idea of, we broke off from our bacteria and archaea broke off, and then at some point in more recent history, archaea and eukaryas broke off, and then we have single-celled eukaryotes breaking off, and then we have other things, molds, and I don't even know what some of these are, and then plants broke off, and animals broke off, and fungi broke off, okay? So you should have some sort of discussion about that sequence, roughly. You could be specific and mention names. Other types of evidence. We have embryological evidence. During development, vertebrate embryos undergo the same stages of development. And vertebrates are the ones that have spines. So just remember that, because I don't think we've talked about that too much. This provides strong evidence of shared ancestry. And we have the pictures. When we look at fish, salamanders, tortoises, chickens, rabbits, and humans, all at the very early stages have very similar embryological development. They do start to differ as you get a little bit older, but even here, you still see quite a bit of similarity up into a point. This is also humans, pigs, reptiles, and birds have similar development, so you can see the embryological development. It definitely changes once you get a certain amount of time into gestation. All right, let's tie it all together. All life is related. Hopefully you're understanding that. There was a universal common ancestor, the LUCA. There is a universal genetic code, which is our DNA. We have the same bases. We all have A, C, T's, and G's. Okay, we have ATP. All living organisms today that we know of, or that in the past that we know of, use ATP, which is the universal energy carrying molecule in cells. Okay, so we all have codons, that same 3 DNA based codes for the same amino acids in all known organisms. So we have, not only do we have the same bases, but they all use the same code for amino acids. So it's kind of interesting how when you go back to the very basics, you can find everything has some similarities. How it's used past that is very different. Plants use ATP differently than humans use ATP. Okay? All right, we are going to stop here for today. Please bring your questions to school if you have any that you would like to go over. Especially, I don't know, I'm sure there's something I did not explain well. So have a great day. I'll see you guys in class. Thank you.